Hello, my name is Lizzie and today I'm going to show you how to make Annabelle. Now Annabelle is a zip around round box that you can put your makeup in or your jewellery, your craft things, so many different ideas, even make one for the children to put their bricks in. So, packed lunch, I've just had a thought, a nice packed lunch. Now inside we've got a zippy pocket that you can put something that's perhaps quite precious, and so you can unzip that, pop that away and it's invisible, and inside's also got a lovely deep double-sided box, so if you had your makeup in there it'll be perfect, wouldn't it, with a nice hinge there. Now Annabelle comes as a download on my website and the link is just down below in the description box. Now it is a chargeable download, so be aware of that before you go ahead and buy. So how do we make Annabelle? Well, let's try and follow the pattern and then you'll soon see. So the first thing we need to do is to stitch the little tabs together. Now you'll have 4 tabs, each of them is lined with, I've put cotton interfacing, but you might want to use a lightweight dressmaking interfacing. It's entirely up to you and what you have in stock. So if I bring my machine in, so what you're going to do is stitch along, so you're putting right sides together and you're stitching along the 2 long sides. Just make sure we've only got 2 there. 1/4 inch is fine, seam allowance, and don't forget to do a little back stitch because you're going to turn this through. I'll just get my needle up again. So I'll just chain those pieces together. So I'm just taking the second pair. Don't forget your back stitch. And then just come down the other side. Tuck the next one under. So we'll just snip the threads, turn these through. Now everything that you do, you're going to give everything a really good press, so it's lovely and neat. I'm just going to turn these through and top stitch, and because they've got the interfacing on, then I think they're easier to get the edges nice and straight anyway. So just pull that through, just get a pokey tool. I use my hemostats. Right, just make sure those edges are lovely and neat. Just push that other edge out. And like I say, you'll iron yours. Don't need to back stitch. So there's one done. So you just repeat for the other side. So I've done my 2 tabs. And now I'm going to stitch my handle together. So again, it's 2 pieces with a cotton interfacing on both. And again, you could use your regular lightweight interfacing or stabilizer. So again, you're stitching down the 2 long sides and then you're turning through. So now I've stitched both sides, I'm going to turn this through and top stitch as I did the same with the tabs. So I've stitched my handle and I've top stitched it so it's beautifully neat. I've stitched both tabs. Well, these are the hinges that go on the box to hold them together. So now all I'm going to do is prepare the bottom base. So I'll put these pieces to one side. So with the bottom base, all I've done there is put my Decaville, which is a more sort of medium weight interfacing on there. It's kind of soft but stiff, so it gives you some structure. And I put a very thin layer of wadding, so I kind of use 80-20. I find that nice. A soya wadding or a bamboo wadding is a similar thing. So it's very thin, but it gives a little bit of loft, and I wanted the loft near the seams. So the next thing you need to do is just pop your tab onto the seam allowance. So if I pin it, I'll put my quilting clips in and show you. So all I've done is popped my tab there with a clip, and I'm going to stay stitch that together so it's nice and secure. If I just show you here, that's what it looks like. So I'm just going to stay stitch that piece in place. So for stay stitching, it's about 1/8 of an inch from the raw edge. So that's my tab in place, ready. So the next stage is to actually sew the zip onto the zip panels. Now this will be too long to go around your base, your circles, so just bear that in mind. We will be trimming back, but far better to trim back than not have enough. So what I've done here is I've prepared my strips. Again, I've put cotton Decaville on the strip itself, and it's 1/4 of an inch cut back, and all of that is in the instructions. And then I've put again a layer of thin wadding over the top. So just like we always do with zips, it's just the top layer, the outer fabric, that I'm going to pop onto the zip. So it's right size together, so the teeth of the zip are showing to the right size of the fabric, and we're going to stitch along this side here. And put your zipper foot on your machine. And if you've got your slider just there, then you can just move it along so it's out of the way. But I always cut my zip far too big. So that's one side done. So you can see there how that looks. And now I'm going to stitch the other side on. So I'm going to line up my edges so they're the same, and then just stitch the other side of the zip down. So what I've done now is attach both sides of my panels, my zip panels, to the zip. So now all I need to do is top stitch that so it's really nice and neat. I'm going to give it a press first though. So what I've done is I've stitched my zip in, and I've top stitched, so you can see on the back, top stitched, neatened it all down, so it's now ready to put onto our base piece. So this is the base piece we did with the tab. Now what I want you to do is right sides together, it doesn't matter which end, and I want you to actually stitch this down from the middle of the tab. So let me pop a clip in there to show you. So it's right sides together. Let me show you here. So it's right sides together, there's your tab in the middle there, and I want you to start stitching halfway across that tab there. Now when you come round the other side, you might find that you need to trim your zipper back, but it gives you a little bit of leeway there. All of that's going to be covered because the hinge, the tab, is going to come straight over the top to make a neat finish. Now before you actually stitch this together, I want you to clip into your seam going all the way around. So it's the seam on the actual zip panel. So one side I've already done and the other side I'll do now. But I don't want you to snip too far, so I want you to consider your 1/4 inch seam allowance. And all you're going to do is just little snips all the way. And this allows you to fold your straight fabric onto a circle. It just makes it so much easier. And just be, like I say, just be careful. You don't want to go any more than a 1/4 inch in from the outside edge. And like I say, it just helps to sort of manipulate it around your circle. And it keeps the measurements correct as well. So just little snips all the way around. Okay, now what you can do, of course, is actually clip the whole thing together, so you can do it all in one go, but I kind of just like to just sort of start out in the middle here, pop your zipper panel down and just work my way around. So let's bring the machine in. So I'm popping my zip panel down in the middle of my tab or the hinge, about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitch to start, and then I'm just going to ease it round. Now in the instructions it actually shows you quite clearly how the little slits that you cut work around the curves. So take a look at the picture in the instructions, because it's really a lot clearer than I can show you with the sewing machine now. So just keep going around. And because everything is stabilised, nothing should stretch, whereas normally with a circle it would stretch and it would contort. So it's nice that it's all stabilised. But just take your time, there's no rush, and try and stick to your 1/4 inch seam allowance. So when you come up to the end, I'm going to stitch it and then show you, and that before I trim it back. You'll find that your zip panels are too long, and this is deliberate. It just means that if I was to tell you exactly how much to cut, it might not work out when you actually come to stitch it together. So you can see this is a good, well, probably good 2 inches too big. So I'm going to trim it back. So I would use your paper scissors because you're going through a zip, and just make sure that you've got that straight. So I'm going to start cutting there. So I'm just going to cut all the way across, a little bit more. You don't want those zip panels to overlap, you just want them to butt up, and the raw edge is fine because we're going to cover it up with the hinge or the tab. So there we are. So there's our piece cut now. So there's our 2 raw edges, if you like, of the zip panel, and if I was to turn it right side out and smooth it out, you can see how that looks. So there's our 2 raw edges, but we've got our zip tab, which eventually we're going to top stitch down, and that neatens the whole thing up. Okay, and when we go to do the lining is done in the same way, so everything is covered. So the next thing we need to do is to put the handle on the bag top. Now all you need to do with that is to fold that in half and just cut 2 little nicks, 2 little tiny triangles out of each end. There we go. And also I'm going to fold this in half again and do one little nick just on one side, and that's to make sure that my tab is all lined up when we come to stitch it together. So we've got the two little V's cut in top and bottom, so I'm going to stay stitch my handle in place here and here to hold that in place once I stitch the zip panels together. So just bring the machine in. And by stay stitching, it means that you're not worrying about getting the layers to stay together and you've got pins and clips. So there's our handle in place, and where we cut that little notch just there, I'm going to top stitch the tab on the other side. So this one here, I'm going to stitch that in place. But before I do that, I'm going to stitch the actual zip in place as well. So we're going to kind of bring it all together. So I'm going to bring the tab up, meet my two zip ends. Probably better if I show you that way. Bring my two zip ends together, and then I'm going to top stitch that tab in place, and then I'm going to stitch this to the zip panels. So I'll just get this all lined up. So just butt up those raw edges of your zip panels. So now what we've done is we've actually brought the tab up from the bottom to the top, and we've stay stitched all those layers together. So if I show it to you that way, you can see the two raw edges of the zip and how that meets, and that's all now secure with the top stitching. So if I show you here as well, you can see how that looks and how neat it makes the finish of the actual box itself. So now what we're going to do is to stitch the top piece onto our bag base. So let's just pop that to one side. So I'm just going to turn this through. Don't forget to open up your zip, otherwise you won't be able to turn it through. So right side's in, and let's get where is the zip here? So just give yourself a little bit of leeway. Now when we finish this, when we put the top on, we're actually going to top stitch that hinged part, and that will keep all of those layers nice and neatly together. So do you remember the little notch we cut? We cut the little notch here. Those are the two notches for the handles. We've cut this top notch here. So that's going in the centre of my hinge, my flap. So I'm just going to line that up and put a clip in. And I'm also going to just bring it across to the other side, and I'm actually going to clip that as well, just so I know that I've got all my fabric in the right place. And again to the side and to the side. And if you want to cut notches in all of these, then please do so. Then you can line it all up. So again, just put our notch in here, our handle. Get that all lined up, and that's perfect. So all I'm going to do now is machine all of those layers together. There we go. That's super. That's all clipped. Just bring the machine in. Now again, I've cut notches, or rather I've cut little slits into my zip panel on the other side, so I know I can ease it around those circles. So you need to then start with the straight side of the zip panel facing you. Just pop it under the machine, and then just take it round your base, or your top, as you did the base. And again, about 1/4 inch. Take your clips out as you go. And cutting those notches really makes a difference. It fits beautifully. So just coming round to the hinge. There we go. And I've just ran over those stitches I started with. So what I can do now is turn it through. Let's just turn it through like this. So a quick mention about my Gold Club. If you haven't joined already, there's no time like the present. Just pop to my website, find the link that says Gold Members Sign Up here, and then you have access to my Facebook weekly events, which is absolutely amazing. My girls love it. And of course you get the free patterns as well. So if you want more information, there is actually a video on YouTube that you can have a little look at. There we go. Got my ends just to stitch down, but there is our top done. Actually, it's that way around. So the next thing I'm going to do is open this up flat. Needs good press. And then I'm just going to top stitch across my tab again. So exactly where I stitched and top stitched them together, then that's where I'm going to stitch to do like a double row, but that's going to hold everything in place. And this is exactly the same process when you do the lining. So you're kind of repeating everything now. So just bring this in under your machine. Pop your needle down to hold everything. And just make sure that is all lovely and parallel. That's a little back stitch there. Now be careful when you're going across your zip. Just take it slowly, especially if you're using a metal zip. And then you're just coming down the other side. Line everything up. Do a little back stitch. And if your zip ends are split like mine have done, which is fine, just make sure those ends are together when you stitch across. Like I say, be careful when you go over the zip teeth, especially if they're metal. So that's our outside of our box done, and there's our zip in place there. So that's the outer part done. It's all beautifully neatened off there. So that tab now you can see has covered over our raw edges, and our zip is beautifully installed, ready to put our lining in. So with the lining, it's very similar to the outside of the box, but the first thing we need to do is make the pocket, which goes right inside. I've put it in the front, you can put it in the base if you want to. So again, all we're going to do, we'll bring the machine in, and you're just putting your fabric right side down onto the right side of the zip, just as we did before. Now I've lined my pieces with cotton interfacing, but you might want to use a lightweight dressmaking interfacing stabiliser. So there's one side installed. You can see how that looks. Then I'm going to do the other side. Make sure your edges are absolutely parallel. And put the edge of the semicircle to the edge of your tape. And you're going to press this so it's lovely and flat. I'm just going to go straight in and top stitch. Now you've got to remember that what you want to make is a circle. So if you need to adjust this at all, then just adjust it by bringing your fabric over a little bit and top stitching. I think that'll be fine. Top stitching always keeps everything in place and gives a nice neat finish. So I've done one side, let's do the other. Just adjust if you need to. Okay, so that's our zipper installed, and obviously you can see it's far too big. I always use zip on a roll, which I find very convenient. I'm just going to trim my zip ends off. So I'm trimming that one off without the zip slider. This is the zip slider here, so I'm just going to make sure I move that into my pocket piece so it's enclosed in the right place, and just cut those ends off. So now all I'm going to do is take one of the pieces, the base piece, the top piece, they're both the same. I'm going to put wrong side to right side. So there's my right side, there's the wrong side, that's going onto the top of the circle like that. And I'm going to stay stitch both those layers together. Just 1/8 of an inch. And perhaps you might want to pin this together or use your quilting clips just to make sure it all fits. So that's the two layers now stitched together, and the pocket is down the centre, and obviously you can pop your hand in there and pop your valuables in there, or your makeup brushes, it depends what you're going to be making. Now I'm just going to trim this back a little bit. So I'm going to put this on the base of my box. I'm going to pop the zip together because I don't need it to be open. So the next thing we need to do is we need to put the other tab in, just like we did before. Now you need to decide whether this is going to go across your base, so your tab will go in here, or whether it goes top and bottom like that, so your tab goes here. But I find it easier just to line it up with the zip. So I'm stitching that down. And the idea of this is why I do stay stitching so much, is because it reduces the amount of fabric that I have to think about when I'm stitching. That's all I do it for. So there's our tab installed. Okay, so now it's time to put the zip panels on. Now with the zip panels, you're going to fold one edge over 1/4 inch. Okay, because we're going to hand stitch the finish, or you can machine it. So the side that hasn't been folded over, which is this one down here, and this has got the cotton interfacing in, that's what I'm going to attach to my base. So again, you just need to clip into it. It does really help. So I'll just quickly do that. Now because I've cut my interfacing 1/4 inch smaller, I can see exactly where I can cut up to. But with the lightweight interfacing, or the cotton interfacing, quite honestly, you could take it right up to the edge, because it, like I say, it is very lightweight. So just take your time. I'm being quite quick. And then it's just that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And again, your zip panels, the lining, these ones, will be that little bit bigger, and that's purposeful. So again, I'm just lining up my first end with the centre of that tab, the hinge. And we're going to start from the centre out. So now I'm just, like I did before, I'm just taking it all the way around. And as you go, you're bending that straight fabric to fit. And because you've snipped into it, it really does curve beautifully around your circle. And then of course you end up with a really nice neat circle. Everything fits. So take your time. Take your time going over the zip. If you've used a metal zip, be ultra careful. And again, we've got a bit to cut off, which is absolutely fine. Let's go up to that edge. Doesn't need a back stitch when I've done it. So you can see I've got a good, a couple of inches to snip away, which is fine. It saves you trying to fit a piece to the circle. We're kind of doing it the opposite way around, which makes it super easy. So we're almost done. So now all I'm going to do is stitch my zip panel onto the other side. But of course, first of all, I need to bring the tab up and stitch it to my circle. Again, it doesn't matter where on that circle. So don't forget, right sides together. And all I'm going to do is a stay stitch. Again, 1/8 of an inch. So there's the tab now installed. So all I'm going to do now is to stitch the zip panel in. So right sides together. Let's get that right. So it's right sides together. So one side is the folded edge, and that's not what you're stitching. And the other side is the clipped edge, which is what we're doing now. So don't forget, just make your way along this. My little snips are about 1/2 inch apart. You could do more, you can do less, but just don't go over that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I've got a visual on this because I cut my cotton interfacing smaller. So just finish snipping that all the way down. There we are. And so it's right sides together. So I've got my hinge here, and I've got my base, or my top, whichever way I decide to put it in. And I'm just going to start with my zip panel halfway across that the panel again, the tab. Too many words. And then just do just what we did before. So by the time you get to do this one, you'll be so used to stitching a straight piece into a circle. And this technique is going to be really useful for other things you do, like bag making. So all the way around. So if you can't follow the video, don't forget to take a look in the instructions as well, because they've been done to help you. So now I've stitched both zip panels on. Obviously I need to stabilise my tab in the centre there. So all I'm going to do is stitch it just like I did before. I'm just going to top stitch it so my raw edges of my zip panels just butt up together. So when you look at it like this, you see all the raw edges meeting. It's difficult for me to show you there. And then all I'm going to do is flip this over. I'm going to flip it back in a minute, just so it's easier to see and to actually machine. And then I'm going to top stitch exactly where I top stitched on the tab before, the hinge. And then that stabilises everything, brings everything together. So just position your needle right near where the seam line is. Just straighten up your pieces so they're all parallel. And then you're literally top stitching. And use those stitches that you just did before as a guide. Just get those to meet. Now the actual folded edges that you've done, that you're going to now hand stitch or machine stitch onto your base, to your outside piece, they won't meet. There'll be a little gap, and that's obviously where the zip is going to go, and I'll show you when I've done. So we'll just flip that around and do the other side. So straighten everything up, get the other zip panel in, get it nice and flat, and then just top stitch. And I've given a little back stitch just for security. So I want you to see how that looks. So if I show it to you there, you'll be able to see that it's brought all those raw edges together, and you've got a lovely tab there. It's going to be the hinge. Now obviously what you need now is for that lovely pretty fabric to be on the inside, because this is what's going to go on the inside of your box. So if we bring the other piece in, so now you will just need to decide whether the zip pocket is going to go on the base of your box or on the lid of your box. So this time I'll put it in the base, and obviously it's going to go straight across. Now because you've actually folded over the zip panel before you stitch all this together, you've got a lovely now neat edge to hand stitch onto your box. But of course you could top stitch this with your machine as well, so just make sure it's all tucked in. Let's I'll just get a pokey tool here and just push it in. You could also hand stitch your seams together, so where the lining seam and the outer box seam meet at the circle at the base, you could actually slip stitch those together so they don't keep coming apart. That's something you could consider doing. So just make sure everything is lined up. Pop this one in there. I mean, you could even glue this if you wanted to. Just make sure that's sitting all lovely and neat. There we go. Take a minute or two to get it all in its right place, and then what you can do is just get your clips and just clip it. Now where you've actually stitched your zip in on the outer, that's kind of like your guide as to where you're going to hand stitch this or top stitch this together. So now I've put all my clips around and got my fabric just where I want it to be. I can either glue this down or hand stitch it, which I did with my original, or you can pop it under the machine and get it lined up. But obviously you might think about the fact that you've already got a top stitch line on the zip, so you might want to follow that. It's entirely up to you, whatever's quickest and whatever's best. So with this time we've got the zip on the base of the pocket here. The pocket is on the base of the box, and then when we flip this over, this is how your box looks. I can't zip it up because I've got my clips in. But if I bring in the original here, it just means that it gives you a lovely box for your makeup, for your jewellery, for all your crafting goodies. That's absolutely stuffed with bracelets in there in that pocket, but you can see how lovely and neat it looks when it's all finished. So that is our Annabelle, and I hope you make loads.